All right. Hi, Anna. Thank you for joining me. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Let me let everybody know what we'll be talking about tonight. So, my name is Amanda Villaveses. I am the director at Mental Health Lou and a therapist at North Star Counseling Center. And I'm joined today by Anna Nicia Williams, who's an LCSW. And we'll be talking about the idea of edge theory, going to the edge of your, oh, sorry, hit that button, going to the edge of your comfort zone, and really finding some great ways for personal growth. But before we begin, I want to introduce Anna as our special guest. So she's a licensed clinical social worker serving both Kentucky and Indiana. And she's the owner of Momology, which is a wellness club where she supports mothers during pregnancy and postpartum. She offers consultation and training. Sorry, I lost my spot there a second. Centered around parent and the dyadic relationship between mother and baby. She's also the co-owner of a nonprofit, the Black Counseling and Consulting Collective, that promotes the advancement of Black mental health and quality care. This fall, she will begin her doctorate program at Spalding University, where she would devote her research to maternal mental health. That's really awesome. And she truly loves the work of service, and you can find her organizing events for the community when she's not in the office. She also has, I hear you have a t-shirt giveaway for us this evening as well.
Yes.
So
I do.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we can add that on to our giveaways if you'd like, and we can find a way to so we can give that t-shirt away for you. That promotes, does that go to the nonprofit, or where does that go towards? Or where's the shirt from?
So I actually just decided to do a shirt. And so some of the proceeds will go to a person who wants to try therapy. I will actually pay for them to seek out a therapist and try their first session.
That's awesome. So cool. Well, we'll put up information after this for the t-shirt giveaway. So let's get started tonight. Not necessarily everybody talks about this in this way that we're going to kind of just introduce it, but this idea, this is called edge theory. And when I was thinking about starting this talk, I was, like I told you, I was listening to this podcast about, and it mentions, this idea that when we go to our edge, or even in nature, when there's an edge of an ecosystem, the most new growth kind of really happens there. There's a lot of new growth, a lot of change, in those edge spaces. And so I know this idea of edge theory basically means, you have a starting point, and you have an end point, but in the middle here is this edge, and that's going to cause probably discomfort and a lot of issues. And so we want to talk about what people might experience as they go to that edge, why they want to go to that edge and look over it, and maybe keep going, and help them figure out ways best to do that. So when talking personally about, just like clients you see or people in your own life, or even your own, what is that really like? What do you see when you think of edges for people? Like, where are people's edges?
I will say most times when people come to you, they may not be aware of that edge. Mm-hmm. And so it may be you as the therapist helping them figure out where is that edge, and then supporting them along that way, so they feel like I'm not out here alone. So when I feel that discomfort, I have some support to fall back on too. And so oftentimes I serve as that supportive piece, but I will say in that personal capacity, I too had to have people kind of push me to the edge a little bit, because it was scary to take that risk.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. And what are some good indicators, do you think, that people are starting to approach their edge?
I will say when people get to a point of, I want something new for myself, I've become kind of stagnant, I want to explore more. Oftentimes people feel like they've kind of gotten to like a dead end in life. And so they're figuring out, what does that look like as far as my career? What does that look like with friendships and families? And so people get in that place of, I want to explore, but then I don't know how to go about doing this. And so a lot of leaning in to that discomfort is very key. And I think that as we'll get into a little bit later, how we form into certain groups that also help us get to that edge.
Yes. Well, and I guess sometimes when we say edge too, we're talking bubble, comfort zone, like there's a few different ways to really talk about it. And I think it's really common that people aren't comfortable stepping out of that, like you said, but there is that, it does seem that it's often paired up with, like you said, a change. There's some kind of change happening, whether it's, I'm unhappy with this, or I've kind of hit the end of the, I've come to the end of maybe this career or this relationship or this, or maybe just my own boundaries need to be reassessed. But so people will, what I hear you saying is that people will know because they'll start thinking about change, or they'll start maybe getting to that place. And maybe if this is like, we're talking about anxiety or depression, they could probably be at the end of that as well, like frustrated, tired, ready to make some change. Yeah. And in another idea, because we try to be very community minded here. So this is kind of a big question, but like, and we'll come back to it as well. But, do you think there are ways that our own community can then also help influence our edge?
Yeah. So we're in Louisville, Kentucky. We know that there's been a lot of highlight in our community about injustice, about the Breonna Taylor case. And so I think that as a community, we are all feeling like we're on the edge. We're wanting some change. We're wanting to see some shifts in policy. And I think that it's allowing people to take a look inward too, to figure out, okay, something has not been working. The system can seem broken. I want to be of support to the community and other people who may not have privilege as me. And so I'm feeling the edge right now amongst our very own community. But I think we're all trying to figure out, where do we go from here?
Right. What does that look like? Yeah. So in a sense, you're saying like entire communities, not just individuals, but entire communities can start to shift and change and go to their edge and kind of be on the edge of something new, some big change.
Absolutely. You see more people speaking out, even with people, posting, Black Lives Matter, or people showing that they're being inclusive and wanting diversity. That's stepping into the edge.
Certainly. Well, and so let's talk initially, like you mentioned earlier, that how edges can be so uncomfortable sometimes. And so let's talk vulnerability, right? So because that's probably a primary feeling that a lot of people are starting to feel. It's like, oh, I feel really vulnerable when I go to my edge. So how can people, work with, like, how do you help people when they're looking over that edge or they're tiptoeing to that edge? How do you help them deal with that discomfort of, maybe feeling exposed or feeling vulnerable as they really want to make a change, but they're really used to what's back here?
Absolutely. So oftentimes I'm very open with them, and I talk about feeling raw. So it's going to feel raw. You're going to feel exposed. So I make sure that I tell them about stepping to the edge. Here are some possibilities of what you will be feeling. But I also help them reflect on, we've been looking at the past and what we've been sitting in. You've expressed to me that you're tired. And so what is the possibility, trying something new and seeing where that can go for you and how that could work for you? And so most times you see people will say, okay, you're right. I've been trying this same scenario. I'm not getting anywhere. What harm could it do to try something new?
Yeah. And so can you talk a little bit about when we were talking about this, you mentioned this phrase, safe second choices or chances. Can you explain that a little bit, like what that means to have a safe second chance?
So a safe second chance is, so when we're stepping into our edge, it's almost like we're learning ourselves too, because this is something new that we've never been able to see ourselves in this capacity. But also having that openness to accept that we will learn something, gain some information, but then it may also open up the door to where we may have to try this again. So having that second chance to say, I didn't get it quite right and how I wanted to see it that first time, but giving myself some grace to say, here's another opportunity because I have some information now. Now I know stepping into this second chance, I can gain a little bit more.
And I think you mentioned too, when we were talking about that, helping people learn to like slow down, not necessarily be reactive and jump into things as much as learning to listen to their bodies, learning to listen to themselves in that process, right? So that you're not just doing things because, like, this is uncomfortable, I want to do something different, but you're teaching them to slow down. So what's like one maybe thing you do to help people kind of learn to listen to their bodies?
So meditation is something that is really big. A lot of people struggle with being able to sit with their thoughts and feelings. And so that's uncomfortable. And so in sessions, we take that time and carve out together. So when you feel that uncomfortableness, when you get those racing thoughts, here I am to support you through that. And also let them know, okay, we can't necessarily do 5 minutes, but can you make it a minute? And so as they begin to, build up, they do get to a place to where it's like, I feel comfortable with who I am, where I am. And also adding in those affirmations too. So they know that they can, remind themselves of who they are, where they want to go. Setting those clear intentions is very helpful in the process too.
Can you give a good example of some of those affirmations? Because I think that's a great example of what people might need. And I like the who they are piece too. So you can just make up a person if you want, but.
Sure. So a lot of times working with women, we work on, self-worth, self-love. And so reminding them to speak to self. So like the queen in you. And so we oftentimes will say, I am queen, I am lovable, I have the power to change. So just something as simple as that. Affirmations are really just setting those clear expectations for yourself. And while you may not be there yet, it's a place you want to go.
Right. This idea of intention setting, right? So it's kind of helps you get to, know your destination, even if you're not quite sure what the path is going to be. And I think I like the idea too of those affirmations, because to me that sounds like, that's kind of just like a nice way of recognizing when you are starting to feel vulnerable or uncomfortable, slowing yourself down for a moment, reminding yourself of your value, reminding yourself, like maybe your intention is I will stay calm, or I will stay true to myself during this time, something like that. It depends on every person, and using that as kind of like a companion in a sense, or a guide to help you get into those intentions.
Yeah.
What are some common things that you work with clients on, as far as, and again, obviously there's confidentiality, but what are some common themes you see people working on when it comes to their personal growth and like going to that edge? Like what are some common edges you see for people?
So oftentimes people will come and say there's a conflict in a relationship that they have, or they're trying to figure out where to take this next step in their life or career. And so we always help support them, get it back to them. And so what I share with them is that while we want to be our best self in that relationship, our best self is that employee or employer, how do we keep that on ourselves? Because once we really do the work with self, we just really thrive in those relationships. And so what I've been seeing lately is just because of COVID, a lot of people being at home and having to manage, families, partners, they are feeling like they don't have a space for them. And so therapy has been a lot of processing lately. So talking about what it's like to not be able to go into the office and have a break from my children, what it's like to balance with my partner, our schedules and how we get through this together. But then also, what about me? And so I'm finding a lot of people are trying to figure out in these hard times, who am I? where do I want to go with myself? And so we have been setting some clear goals as far as once we do get out of this, we don't know what that will look like, but what does that look like for us on a personal level?
Mm-hmm. Great. I like that you mentioned that, actually, like what's going on right now, and acknowledging that like this will end. It will end eventually. And so where will we be going, and how will we be taking care of ourselves until we get there? And yeah, I think a lot of people are probably in that space, especially as you mentioned that, I can hear my children downstairs like running around, and so yeah. And I know, I think in general, like in my work with clients, as you mentioned earlier, like self-worth, I think a lot of people, you might not even think of it this way, but like for some people, their edge is getting into self-worth or self-compassion, or, because they've maybe come from a background, or some life circumstances have brought them to a space where they're really hard on themselves, or they don't value themselves, or they don't know how to talk compassionately to themselves. And so, just hearing your affirmations, like, yeah, for some people that is their edge, right? And that can be uncomfortable enough maybe to just even say those words to yourself. So there in itself is enough of a process.
Absolutely. So working from a strength space, so I love to focus on people's strengths in sessions too, because oftentimes they may come and think that, I'm coming here broken, or I'm coming here and I have all of these things going on. Sometimes you, as therapists, it's like we're shining the light on some of the strengths that they may not have acknowledged. And as we build them up, I think that encourages them more to step into that edge.
Mm-hmm. And when you see them step into that edge, isn't that just one of the most like satisfying things as a therapist? And you're like, you did it. I knew you could do it.
Yeah. Yes. It's like you have to look at those victories, because then it's like, how do we keep going? We have to celebrate this. And so I always encourage them, how do you want to celebrate this milestone for yourself?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yes. Don't just like let it go by. Make sure you actually remember it and celebrate it, because you should be doing that you can do that for everything in life, um, and cheer yourself on the whole way, I guess, like you said, like using this strength-based approach. Well, and of course, before we get to the strength-based part, or the growth part, let's talk about the risk taking. So, and you and I might not even really use the word risk taking, but I know for people who are working on going to their edge, whether it's, I'm going to start a new company and it's really scary and I don't know how to be a boss, or I've always wanted to, travel somewhere and I'm terrified of flying, or, or I want to make changes in my relationship and I don't know how to ask my partner for those changes. So that might feel risky for people. And why do you think that is? Why do you think that edge feels so risky in general?
So you have to think about behavior. We're used to being a certain way. We're used to showing up as someone who I like my coffee this way. I like on Mondays where I have this on the agenda. And so preparing to step into the edge, it's that unknown factor. And so now it's like, I have to trust this process. I have to lean into, I cannot even see where this is about to go, where I'm used to being pretty precise and in control. And so that's the huge thing about stepping into the edge. It can feel like a loss of control.
Mm-hmm. What do you do when you notice people are really resisting? Like they come to you, they say, I want to make these changes. This feels really scary. Maybe you even start making some changes to kind of like go to that edge, and then you notice resistance.
Yes. So I'm someone who likes to be transparent too. And so we talk about it. We talk about the resistance. So we talk about, what is your body telling you? And so really helping people understand that our body speaks to us. So back to that, meditation and doing some mindfulness, thinking about, do you feel it in your stomach? Do you feel your palms sweating? Some people may feel like they get tension headaches. And so making them aware of our body is speaking to us, even in that silence. And so when our body does speak to us, that lets us know, that fight, flight response, what are we going to do here? And so oftentimes you kind of have to help them think of, well, what's the plan ahead of time? Because if I do feel these feelings, I need to know what do I do with this? And so that's where those coping skills come in that we work with clients oftentimes about. And so we talk about those coping skills, and I often ask them, were you able to use your toolbox when you were feeling that resistance? And most times you will see that people forget, because it's almost as if their brain just kind of just freezes as we talk about, and they're not able to go back to those tools in that moment. So just coaching them through and saying, it's okay that you felt that resistance. Be open to trying this again.
And do you think, or do you notice, this is maybe such a psychoanalytic kind of thing to say, but like for some people, that resistance goes back to childhood, or that resistance might connect to a traumatic event in their lives or something along those lines. Not always, but I think we definitely might see either something from their family of origin, where they've grown up in a household that didn't do that and it feels really foreign. Or just, like I said, they might have had some previous experiences. Even, it doesn't have to, when I say traumatic, it doesn't have to be this idea either for people who are listening of something, extremely traumatic. It could be, something that felt traumatic to you. So
absolutely. So as you know, we let them define, their experiences and events and what is traumatic. But anytime you're kind of stepping out, oftentimes I see with people, they're doing something that is going against the normalcy in their family. And so if you decide, oh, I'm going to step out and I'm going to start a business, whereas your family comes from people who were just hard workers, they showed up, they worked for the employer. So here you are breaking a chain. And so that can be scary because you don't have anyone in the family to refer back to. So you're building this whole new blueprint on your own. And so that's where I think the benefit of therapy comes in.
Yeah, I hear you. And the idea too then of therapy can be helpful in the sense of helping you build that blueprint or helping you find those resources. And now, of course, we lean towards therapy because that's what we do. But of course, people can, some people can do these things on their own as well, or they can practice these in other ways. And one thing I'd like to talk about is, how can we, maybe have an accountability partner or a person, so if you are able to recognize, I want to do this thing, it feels really scary, or I notice I'm really struggling, with this change. So what is the value, and what does that even really mean, an accountability partner? Because, what do people, how do people use accountability partners to help make some of these changes?
So I challenge people with accountability because identifying someone who is not going to enable you, but is also going to, tell you the truth and, hold you accountable as far as saying, hey, you said you're going to do something, you didn't do it, and being receptive to that feedback. And so with accountability partners, you may want to pick someone who is not necessarily really close to you. You may want to pick someone who you may be associates and you may have a relationship, but it's not a relationship where you feel as if it would do harm, them giving you that hard feedback sometimes, even when you don't want to hear it. And so with accountability partners, it takes communication. And so I share with people, write down what you would like from that accountability partner, share it with them, and see if that's something that they can commit to. Because oftentimes we'll ask people, be my accountability partner, to go to the gym. And then we get upset when they don't do that. And so if we can clearly communicate what we need from that person, that helps both.
Yes, and I think that's a good idea, that as far as thinking ahead too of what do I want out of this relationship, or how is this going to be helpful for me? And then if you can give that info to people, then then they know what to expect, and they know they don't have to be, they don't have to drag your butt out of bed at 5 a.m. or something like that. You just want somebody who maybe is going to meet you at the gym or call and say, like, you know, cheer you on even. Hey, how'd you do today? I think for some people, if you don't feel like you have that person in your life, you might consider looking for groups, right? Like, there are so many Facebook support groups where people are, you know, connecting and supporting each other and checking in. And it's a good place to say, like, hey, I went running today. And other people can, you know, say, like, good job. Or in person's not really a thing so much right now, but it is for some people, I guess. But organizations also like Meetup. Are you familiar with meetup.org?
I've heard of it, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll send people there sometimes because there's so many different groups, and you could do a bird watching group, you could do a kickball club, you could do a book club, you could do, you know, just a women's group. But you might also be able to find, even within that, like, ways to meet up with people and kind of continue your personal growth, whatever it is. So yeah, so I love the idea of having an accountability person. So it's not just like up here in your head, but you put it out into the world, right? And now you're kind of holding yourself accountable too, because you told somebody. So let's talk a little bit about,
if it's not there like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was saying if it's not there like you mentioned, some people may be encouraged to start their own. So they may put it on Facebook and say, hey, you all, I'm starting a group. I'm creating this. I'm inviting you if you will participate. Those are ways. And then your employer, a lot of employers are wanting to do more self-care activities and create groups. That's another opportunity for people to, you know, take as well.
That is so true. And I think you are probably one of those people who would just start the group, aren't you?
No, I think I would like whisper in someone's ear and say, hey, I'm sorry, you started.
Yeah. Well, it's like, looking at all you do, I'm like, I don't think you wait for people. I think you just get started. But well, yeah, so let's talk a little bit about how people can get unstuck, because I think that's, or, you know, like get past that resistance or find ways, you know, and I think we've talked about it to some degree, as you've mentioned, you know, being able to really slow down and connect with your body. Let's talk a little bit about, like, within this pacing, or this idea of pacing, because a lot of people maybe come to you or and they're thinking, I want to change. Can I be different tomorrow? So what does pacing look like, and even how that connects with learning to slow down and listen to your body and honor yourself?
So I'm so glad you asked that, because a lot of people are trying therapy now and it's their first time. And so they're like, how does this work? Like, how many times do I need to see you? Like, what's the frequency? And so giving them that education about, well, typically, we start off maybe meeting weekly, and what I do is check in with you and see how things are going based off the goals that you set. Not the goals that I set, but the goals that you set. Letting them know that we can always go back and revisit them. Or I'm always going to be checking in with you to see how you're feeling, because sometimes people will set goals and say, you know, this is not working for me. I would like to focus on this. And so letting them know they have the power to change that. But then also letting them know we don't want to move too fast, but we want to find the right pace for you. And so I tell people, I give them homework outside of us actually meeting for therapy, because I feel like that's where the real work happens. And so you and I do work together, but now I want to see you go out and actually implement this. And so if they do that, they can then give back feedback and say, hey, I really like that. That was helpful. Or they may say, no, I didn't like that. Do you have another option? Or you may find with some people that resistance, and it's like, I didn't try it. So then it's like, well, then what are we doing here? Because this is what you've communicated. So how are we going to know what works for you if you're not willing to try? And so just letting them also know that this is a partnership, but you're in the driver's seat. And so I'm here to support you. during this journey of yours. This is your journey. And so really giving them that feedback that the power is in you. The tools are in you. What I do is help you bring that out.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, and so what I'm hearing you say too is it's not an overnight thing. Things look different for everybody. But it's good to be active. It's good to be part of the process. And it's good to know that some things, this thing didn't work for you. That's okay. Try, fail, try again. Just start over and find some other tools and techniques. Yeah. And I think for many of us too, especially like if we're talking about anxiety, say, we don't have to go to that edge and jump over. We can go to that edge. We can peek over. We can think about it. We can nudge ourselves over a little bit. We can build a bridge. We can do many different things. And so you can very slowly create that pace for what feels comfortable for you, even though there is probably going to be some moments where you're doing something that's a little bit, that's outside of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and when you're giving some of this homework for people, in what ways are you helping them maybe like reflect, or, can you give us a hint on what some of this homework is?
Yes. So like you mentioned earlier about childhood, sometimes it's connected. And so sometimes homework may be, where is the first time that you received this message that, you were unworthy or that you were not good at it? And so that allows people to, kind of think back and say, oh my gosh, like I remember in elementary school when my teacher, or I remember when my mom said this. And so what we see is most times they suppress that, they kind of bury that. They had forgot all about that message. And then it's like that aha moment happens. And it's like, wow, I had no idea that impacted me more than what I thought it did.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because in a sense, that kind of like is the foundation for all these other experiences, right, that come after it. And then that's all kind of weighted on these hurt feelings or something along those lines, that if you can't get in there to recognize that, then you just continue to pile on to those hurt feelings without acknowledging it.
Yeah.
And as far as self-compassion goes, like I love teaching my clients self-compassion, and really being able to, like, when they have moments like that, like, oh, I was in second grade and this thing happened, somebody bullied me. And from then on, I started behaving a certain way. And then, that continued, and I've been doing that ever since. And so to really slow down and maybe even have just a moment of, picture that second grade you. How do you feel about that kid? What do you want to do for that kid? You want to give him a hug and tell him it's okay? And I know there are probably people who are like, oh, silly therapist. But really, building that self-compassion for yourself, I think, is so important, because it does help kind of heal some of those early wounds, right? So how do you use self-compassion or teach self-compassion to your clients?
I think it is an ongoing process. That is something that I find myself having struggles with sometimes too. So, even in the work that we do, we always want to show up. We always want to give our best to this cause and everything, but also having to kind of like pace ourselves and kind of take a step back and say, okay, like if I want to pour into so much, then I have to fill myself up. And so reminding myself that it is definitely okay to not participate in this thing, and to, take a step back and maybe show up at the next thing. So that's something personally I have to do. And say, it is okay that you were not there, so you don't have to be everything. But I think also working with our clients, that self-compassion also is about that validation for them. So having that space to talk about that story in second grade, whereas with someone else, they were like, second grade, get over it. But with we're listening. We are validating what they felt, their feelings, and giving them that space to really process through that. And so you will see most times people want to be heard. People want to feel understood. And so that self-compassion can get built when they have these positive interactions that can come from a therapist or a mentor or just someone that you trust, that you feel that will allow you to share that space too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I know you work with, like, like I said in the beginning, you work with mothers and babies, and I imagine you see even just personal growth and in that arena, especially, when you're bringing home a newborn, especially if it's your first newborn, bringing home a baby from the hospital, that is really scary for some of us. I don't know that many moms who came home and said, I got this, no problem. And for those who did, awesome, congratulations. I know I was not that mom. I was the mom who was like, why is the nurse not getting in the car? Doesn't she, why do they trust us with this?
Right.
So how do you help, just a little bit of your own practice, how do you help new moms, whose bodies are going through so many changes as well in this moment? And how do you help them kind of work through some of these, like this edge, this really scary edge? Because once you have the baby, you really can't go back at that point, right? So you've already crossed the edge. So how do you help them as they step into parenthood and, motherhood?
Yes. So I always share with them, you have a baby, everybody wants to hold the baby, love on the baby, but then I'm here to hold mama, because oftentimes there's no one here to support mom as far as what she's feeling, what she's thinking, what she needs. Oftentimes there's just so much going on in the mother's head that she feels like, I have to do this. I have to be the best. And so we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as moms as well. And so I let mom just kind of think about, how do you want to show up as a mom? Because what I see too is that how people were parented, either they're like, oh, I want to do what my mom did or my dad did, or I don't want any parts of that. And so allowing them to kind of shape their parent experience, because oftentimes, we read all these books and it says that you're supposed to be this type of way and that type of way. And when you do this, you'll have this type of child. And so that can feel like a lot of pressure. And so normalizing that each mother is an individual, each baby is an individual, and allowing them to figure out how I want to be with my family and how do I want to show up for myself. And so I see that oftentimes when you give people that permission, they feel really good, because they can say, okay, well, I have that power to kind of make this choice and then involve my partner in this choice too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh gosh, when you said that, I was like, where were you when I had my first baby? I love that idea of just, like, I'm here to hold you. I'm here. So, and it sounds like you're just, you work on giving them that space. And then within that space and that validation, that's where people probably feel more comfortable. You said, you give them that permission, and then they can really step into this new life and this new role. And I think we could apply that to the edge in general is, the edge doesn't have to be an edge. It doesn't have to be a cliff. It can really be an open space. And you're giving them permission to enter into it and seek it out, and you're validating them. And, and if you're in therapy, we're there to hold you, and we're there to walk by you and be there to support you. And if you're not in therapy, that's where your friends and your family and your accountability buddies are really helpful. And that gets me into, one of our last few questions here is going back to this idea of community. And so, how, like you've mentioned, our community is going through some really big changes at the moment. And I found myself thinking the other day, gosh, I really hope that some of these changes really stick, because I feel like personally, just for me, I have definitely gone outside, which sounds really bizarre right now because we're all kind of confined to our houses for the most part, but I have very much kind of like expanded my connection with people in Louisville who don't just live in my neighborhood or who aren't just in my friend group. I've really gotten to know people who are just totally outside of my circle. And I found it really awesome and fascinating. And, I feel really honored to like live in the city we live in, to have the people we have in it. And so, as we're thinking about how we as a community can support each other in these things, and this is a huge question. So, but, what kind of ways do you think we can continue to support each other as communities, as neighborhoods, as neighbors, as friends, etc.?
Okay. So yes,
giant question.
Big question. And so it's not a sprint. So this is not something that, like you mentioned earlier, we're just going to fix overnight or in a couple of months. This is a marathon that we're all running together. And so it's an investment from all of us, but then also accepting everyone's going to be at their different pace of where they're going as far as stepping into the edge. I think one key part is think about the circle that you're already a part of. So stepping into the edge, noticing who's already in that circle and saying and identifying, is someone missing from this circle? Do we need other voices in this circle? And so if something goes off like that light bulb and say, yeah, someone's missing, then saying and taking that effort to say, I think that I want to explore another group or another area. And so then there's this piece of, well, where do I go? How do I do that? Who do I talk to? I love social media right now because there are so many postings, so many groups, so many things happen virtually. And so I think social media is a great way to connect. And so if you are encouraged, you may just inbox someone or you may just start a conversation. I think right now, because we're missing that face-to-face connection, you can still connect with people. Just start a conversation and talk about something as simple as, how are you feeling today? Or how are you doing? Or what are you seeing, in the community? And it may be people in your community or outside of your community where you work at. You may want to step outside the box and talk to a coworker you've never had the opportunity to talk to. Build those relationships. Or possibly where you go to church at. You can talk to someone that you haven't had the opportunity to talk to. I think that even though our city has experienced so much, there's opportunities where people do want to talk. People are open to engaging in dialogue, answering questions, but just being mindful if that person's in that space to do that.
Yeah, I love that idea of, asking yourself, looking around your group right now, going, who's missing? Or what's missing? Or how do I, and then finding those ways to connect with people. And like I say, I think a lot of right now, because of, the environment we're living in and the change that people are pushing for, it really is bringing a lot of different people together from all walks of life. And that is that idea of those ecosystems, right? Side by side, those two very different worlds sometimes. And there's so much growth that can happen within those if you're able to extend, well, maybe not extend a hand at the moment, but, but have that conversation, like you said, with someone at the grocery store or a coworker that you haven't really talked to before. I know I've been connecting with a lot of people on like Instagram and just, hey, I really love what you're posting or commenting on something. And then next thing you know, you're just in this conversation and, you're friends suddenly and I think that's so great because we do see that when people do step out of their bubbles, they start to grow and change in ways that can be really powerful. And they can even find strength sometimes to do something that within their bubble felt scary or hard, or maybe it was too different, right, than the people in their bubble. But when they start going to that edge, then they start to feel more confident about making some of those changes. And then as far as our therapeutic community, because we've got a really big therapeutic community in Louisville.
Yeah.
And so, what ways do you think that therapists can, and we've talked about this a lot, but like can bring maybe not necessarily clients within the office, but outside. How can we help continue people outside the office to expand, to go to their edge, to build, to build bridges and connect? I think as mental health professionals, we have a lot of insight, but we often don't have a lot of connection as far as, maybe the government or, the lawmakers or people within, but we have a lot of insight into how people operate and what's going on within communities, and we don't always become part of that conversation. And that's not necessarily to say that we, should all rush, to the mayor's, I don't know, the governor, whatever, but you know what I mean?
Absolutely. So that same advice should apply to us. So we should also be looking at the table and say, who's missing? Who do we need a part of these conversations? Because I think that even in policy, now there's a big push for mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily see policy and having these conversations. We would love to talk to you about a policy.
Mm-hmm.
We would love to.
I agree.
Just like, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and finish.
I was just saying, just like we encourage our clients to step into the edge, I think that we can lead as well by doing that for ourselves too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, certainly. I know I've been thinking a lot lately about just the power of, as you talked about earlier, when we're in fight or flight, it's really, really hard for us to make good choices and good decisions.
Yeah.
And simply teaching that to the public at large, and, so that people can understand that when we're in fight or flight, we can't be in sort of we can't necessarily be our best self. We can't necessarily make good decisions in that situation. And so learning that self-awareness of, oh, I'm in fight or flight, and learning how to, like you said, the coping tools to help yourself when you're in that moment, so that you can help, maybe relax, calm yourself down, shift back into that, the other brain there, where you're going to be making, better decisions. You're going to choose to maybe talk it out versus, act or react. That's something I would love to be able to just kind of, like, I feel like we as therapists should just walk around handing out flyers or something. Just FYI, everybody.
Go this parking lot, just, put them on cars.
Yes, exactly. And I like what you said, as far as, even like, we are not perfect. We even have to continue to push ourselves and go to our own edge of knowledge, our own edge with our comfort zone, and get to know, new techniques, new people, have new experiences in ways that are going to help us grow as individuals as well. Not just, sit on our high horse and say, we know mental health.
And it's ever changing.
Certainly. Yes. Well, that is that's most of the questions I had for you tonight. So I was thinking, like, if we could wrap this up or summarize this for people, what way might you want to, what are the key important things that you might want to summarize for people as far as learning to grow, going to your edge, etc.?
So I think that normalize everyone has discomfort in stepping into the edge. So whether we're speaking from the mental health therapist or whether we're speaking from someone seeking services, we are all, get discombobulated when it's time to step into that discomfort. And also knowing that we want to pace ourselves and have that support. So that accountability person too. I think that is very key when you're going to step into the edge and try something new. Have that person that can be there to support you, who may not be a therapist, but it may be a family member or someone that you've identified that you trust and that can hold that accountability piece.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And it might feel scary, and you can sit with it. It's going to be okay, because you're going to teach them how to sit with it.
Absolutely.
Were you going to say something else? Sorry, I interrupted you there.
It's okay. It's community, like you mentioned. We're all in this together, so remembering everyone is at a different place right now too, as far as how they're stepping to the edge. And so just being mindful of putting pressure on someone to be where you are and stepping into your edge, because that may not be what's happening for them.
Yes, I love that point. That's so true. People nobody is us. So we can't expect others to be where we are, or to know what we know, or to be as motivated as we are, etc. So yeah, giving people some compassion and grace as they are learning, how to go to their own edge, or they're in their own process. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Before we go, I would like you to tell us a little bit more about the Momology Wellness Club, and to tell us about the Black Counseling and Consulting Collective.
Sure. So Momology is dear to me, and something I am building too. So working not only with moms, but helping them have a space for them. So like I shared with you, holding the moms, so that health piece. I do a lot of perinatal mental health because I'm certified in that. So moms having postpartum depression, anxiety, sometimes mom have psychosis as well, but then also involving that partner too on how to support mom, because what we know in research, when mom is taken care of, she can show up and take care of her babies too.
Mm-hmm.
And so educating the community too. And so a lot of people don't necessarily understand that we should be screening moms, when they're leaving the hospital, and then when they go home too, just to make sure that their needs are being met as well.
Mm-hmm. Right, because you go to 1 million appointments for the baby, but maybe like 1 or 2 for mom.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you don't always get to sit, and the focus is often on baby. Is baby doing okay, and not maybe how's mom?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And where can people find out more info about that one?
So I'm actually on Instagram. So it is Momology MW Club on Instagram. And then you can also email me at momologymwclub@gmail.com.
Great. And do you want to tell us about the collective as well?
Yes. So this is something new that myself and 2 other clinicians, Erica Reevy and Michelle Davidson, started. And this started this summer, just what was happening in the community. And so we actually had healing circles in the summer waterfront. And so what we have found is that, just oftentimes in the Black community, there's a huge stigma. So we want to make sure that we allow them to kind of work through that stigmatization as far as getting resources and access to therapy, that historical trauma too. And then not only will we be seeing clients, we want to make sure we connect them to other clinicians in the community too that can really support them in the work that they will be working on too.
That is awesome. Yes, that's great. And I love that you're a nonprofit too, because I think that's even better. Than you can kind of expand and, get grants or get support and, even fund projects and things. So that's really cool. And we'll definitely check in with you as that grows, because congratulations on starting that. That's really cool. I know sometimes things, take a little while, but I know I saw you all doing some of those healing circles and things. And I think that was definitely, and continuing, our community needs it. We definitely need it. And so it's nice that we have so many great practitioners in this city who are doing such good work. So, and then finally you mentioned the t-shirt giveaway, and what I would like to do is I'd like to post it on our Instagram and have people follow you at either Momology or the Black Counseling and Consulting Collective. Is there an Instagram for that one? Great. So we'll post that.
Facebook.
Oh, you're on Facebook?
For the other one, it's on Facebook.
Okay, great. Well, we'll do a little t-shirt giveaway and let people know more about you. So, all right. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we'll be posting all of this information on our YouTube page and on the Santa Mind app in about like roughly around the weekend, so people can catch this if they've missed any part of it. So we really appreciate your support and you bringing your wealth of knowledge with us tonight. So thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good evening.